Welcome to Raptor's Recon, and today's topic is going to be Boba Fett, the movie. Today we're going to take a look at an article that I'm sure a lot of you guys have already seen the traffic about the upcoming Star Wars Boba Fett movie. I'm going to go ahead and read that, and then I'm going to give you my take on two possibilities as far as how this movie could go, and then I'll hopefully make this a little bit more interactive as well. I'm going to try and incorporate a poll in the video here, so that way I can get a pulse on what you guys want to see. All right, so let's begin. The article I'm going to read for you real quick today is from HollywoodReporter.com. The title is Star Wars Boba Fett Movie in the Works with James Mangold exclusive. Lucasfilm is developing movies on a slew of characters including Obi-Wan Kenobi. The hunt is on. James Mangold is writing and will direct a Star Wars standalone movie centered on Boba Fett, the feared bounty hunter and fan-favorite character, The Hollywood Reporter has exclusively learned. The reveal comes as Disney and Disney-owned Lucasfilm prepare for the release of the latest Star Wars standalone film, Solo, a Star Wars story. Solo, which opens Friday, is the second movie to be spun from the main Star Wars line. Rogue One, a Star Wars story, was the first, but is the first to focus on a particular character. Lucasfilm is developing movies on a slew of characters, including Obi-Wan Kenobi, which has Stephen Daldry in negotiations to direct, although no writers are working on the script. It was rumored that Simon Kinberg, the writer-producer behind the X-Men franchise and films such as The Martian, was working on a Boba Fett movie. While Lucasfilm and Disney won't make any official confirmation, sources say that Mangold will co-write the script with Kinberg, who will also produce the Boba Fett project. Kinberg and Mangold are close, having worked on Logan, the X-Men spin-off that earned high praises last year. Boba Fett was introduced in 1980's Empire Strikes Back and then appeared in 1983's Return of the Jedi as the mercenary who brings Han Solo to the slug-like crime lord Jabba the Hutt. Despite having a helmet over his face and very limited time on screen, not to mention a slapstick death, the character with his jetpack and battle-scarred armor grew to cult status. The George Lucas prequels showed Boba Fett's origin as a subplot, but more importantly, his escapades were featured in various books, comics, animated series, video games, and merchandising. Jeremy Bulloch inhabited the role in the initial movies. Details for the Boba Fett storyline are being kept deep in the Sarlacc pit. Mangold brought prestige to the superhero genre with Logan, which he co-wrote and directed, and was produced by Kinberg. The X-Men standalone featuring Wolverine earned the filmmaker plaudits as well as an Oscar nomination for Best Adapted Screenplay. The writer-director, who also counts the Johnny Cash biopic Walk the Line, the Tom Cruise action movie Night and Day, and the western 3:10 to Yuma among his credits, is prepping to step behind the camera this summer for a Ford versus Ferrari drama for Fox. Mangold is repped by WME, Management 360, and Sloan Offer. So first off, before we really get into this, I want to say that I think the choice for Mangold to basically direct this film is a really good choice. I'm not sure what most of you guys think about Logan, but for me personally, I thought it was very well done. I thought it was emotional. It had good action. It was gritty, and it was a good send-off for Wolverine. That's my personal take on that. So I'm very pleased with this. So hopefully you are too. With that said, the way I look at this, there's kind of two ways we can go with this story. All right. So here's where we're gonna get started, and this is where I'm gonna ask you for some help and see what you guys think, and then I'll kind of talk about what we can do, or what the Lucasfilm creative team can do within the bounds of those two stories. At least some ideas. So first off, we got to figure out what timeline do we want Boba Fett. Okay, do we want it pre-Sarlacc pit or post-Sarlacc pit? Okay, Obviously, that was his slapstick death, like this article talked about. And so that is kind of like a line in the sand where you either are going to go before it or you're going to go after it. Personally, I think you could have a successful story on either side, but I'd like to see what you think. So before I get into my discussion about how we can work with either of those, I'd like to see what you have to say. So here in a second, I'm going to pop up the poll. I'd love you to just take a click. Say, let me know if you want to see a movie that's before Boba Fett met his fate at the Sarlacc or after. So let's assume that you chose before the Sarlacc pit. All right. So now there's pros and cons for each of these things. All right. But one of the big pros is that you can tie this into the other individual films that have already played, i.e. Solo, and that are upcoming. Obi-Wan. All right. And I'll kind of explain how I go about tying those three together. So what I would call this, if I were to write this movie or this screenplay, I'd call this Boba Fett, The Great Hunt. Okay? So what is The Great Hunt? If you look back into Star Wars lore and some of the, it's more like Legends material, but The Great Hunt was a competition. It had its origins with the Mandalorian people, and it was a test of skill. Typically, if I remember correctly, it was on the moon of Dixon, or Dizun. I don't know how you want to spell it, or how you want to say it. It's DXUN. And there's a lot of things that happened on that in that moon in Legends. But anyway, it would be a competition among hunters to see who is the best, and they would get a prize, etc. Eventually, that would also be used by bounty hunters, and so there was only a certain number of these great hunts that had been called. They're very, very rare, and the third one was won by a bounty hunter. And anyway, you could also tie this in for those who are familiar with the game, the MMO, the Old Republic. If you pick the bounty hunter path, you get to go on a great hunt for yourself. So you win money, prestige, you're the champion, right? So what I would do, or I would suggest, is that a message goes out that somebody is funding another great hunt. This hasn't happened since, at least by canon, like around 3600 or so BBY. So before Yavin. So this has a great hunt hasn't been called in thousands of years. So now a great hunt is being called for. There's a lot of money on the line, and participants are allowed to sign up, and throughout the great hunt, basically you're going to be assigned, the competitors are going to be kind of matched up. They're not going to know who their opponents are, but they're going to basically have a couple of individuals pursuing the same target. And so whoever can claim that target will move on to the next round. Now, they don't have to necessarily kill the other bounty hunters or participants, but they need to either neutralize them or whatnot, and they need to be able to turn in their bounty to get credit. So the way I would envision this going down is the APB goes out, there's a great hunt on, and There's a lot of money on the line, prestige, all of that. And so now you've got bounty hunters coming out of the woodworks. I mean, you have bounty hunters from everywhere. So I put up on the screen here, and these are bounty hunters that were famous in the Clone Wars. Now, if we did this prior to the Sarlacc, even if it was after that, you could possibly still do this kind of a storyline, but you could include all of these guys. I mean, if you don't, if you haven't watched the Clone Wars, they had a lot of very good episodes involving bounty hunters. So you had Embo, who was really good. He's credited as having, he was only a second to Cad Bane, which Cad Bane would be like number one bounty hunter from the Clone Wars. And as you can see from this list, there's a number of various characters who could participate. So I think that would be an awesome way to bring in a number of characters that we saw on the screen who were in the Clone Wars cartoon / animation, and bring them into a movie. And now all of these guys are competing against each other. Now later on, I'm going to have a little bit of a poll to kind of see which bounty hunters you would like from the Clone Wars era. I'm going to put a poll up for the Clone Wars bounty hunters, and then bounty hunters that we know from the original Trilogy era, and we'll talk about those here in a second. But to continue on in this vein, I think that it's not necessarily, it doesn't have to only be bounty hunters that participate, but we could also have some other special surprises from the Clone Wars era, and that would be in the form of, number one, Asajj Ventress. We don't know what happened to her, but Asajj Ventress was an amazing character. Well-developed enemy, well-developed, assassin / general, / point woman for the Separatists. Worked closely with Count Dooku and faced off against Obi-Wan and number of, and Anakin and and Yoda even. I mean, she was involved in a lot of things, and I thought it was a very well developed character. I would also like to see Dirge get resurrected and get put on the big screen. He never really, if you guys aren't familiar, I'm going to put up a couple of screenshots and such. If you didn't get to watch the original Clone Wars animated series, it's actually like kind of short episodes. You can sit down and watch the whole thing, in one evening. It was really well done. I mean, I actually really liked some of the things that they had in that cartoon, and that's different than obviously the animated series. They did not use Dirge in the animated series, but in the original one they did. And this guy was a general alongside Asajj Ventress, and he faced off he was like, I remember reading somewhere like somebody likened him to some eldritch horror, this unstoppable beast. He was like a biological Terminator, if you will. Huge, over 7 feet tall, armored as strong as with armor as formidable as Mandalorians. He hunted Jedi. That was his job, was to hunt them down. And him and Asajj worked together as a team on numerous occasions. And the only one that bested them was General Grievous. There was an episode in the original series that showed General Grievous defeating them. Now, I will point out, because you can say, oh, well, General Grievous, because kind of his depiction in the movie slash the more recent animated, he was good and bad, but I think one thing I thought that was lost was the depiction of General Grievous in that original animated film. I don't want to get too far off on a tangent, but in that film he was feared because he beat Jedi straight up, and they showed him, and they were intimidated, and he was hardcore, and it took him. He was able to basically defeat Dirge and Asajj Ventress together, so it was pretty awesome. But anyway, getting back to Dirge, I think he would be, and I could see Asajj Ventress and Dirge working together during this hunt, and they would be very formidable. You have one, dual lightsaber wielding, Sith, dark side acolyte. You've got a bounty hunter armored to the teeth, and he's got weapons, strength, and you cannot put this down. If you let even a piece of him survive, he will grow back. I mean, it was insane. It was awesome. So I would love to see those guys. So those are kind of two of my favorites from the Clone Wars, alongside with Cad Bane, that I would like to see. But that's my opinion. I'd love to hear what your opinion is. Then we move on to the original trilogy. So obviously the movie is called Boba Fett, so he is the standout among the original trilogy. But you have others like Dengar, you have IG-88, his various incarnations. I think it was A, B, C, and D, or whatever. He had different copies of himself. You have Bosk, you have Forlom and Zuckuss. So, you had a very good cross section, and you know these guys were the best of the best because Darth Vader hired them. Okay, so that's kind of a stamp of approval right there. They were in their own ways. They all had their various strengths and weaknesses, and they've worked together. Boba Fett worked with Dengar, with Bosk, with a lot of these folks, and then obviously, Forlom and Zuckuss were a team. So I would love to see these guys, participate as well. So bringing in, the OG characters, I'd like to see who would you think would should make an appearance in this competition, or more clearly, who do you think is going to win? I mean, now Boba Fett's going to be in the finals, that, but who do you want to see progress from the original trilogy? Okay, so at this point you're probably wondering, okay, so where am I going with this? I mean, so basically what's going to happen, at least the way I would do this, is there are going to be targets laid out, and you're going to have different, maybe they could do it Clone Wars versus New War, or I would just really mix it all up. It doesn't matter. Add in new characters, for goodness sake. There's, your mind's the limit, your imagination's the limit. So I would tell the Lucasfilm team, hey, you could throw in extra guys too. Who cares? Throw in as many as you want, to make it exciting. And I'd like to see the movie progress where you see these various targets getting taken out, and you're kind of trying to figure out what's going on here. Like, why is X politician being targeted? Why is this underworld person being targeted? Why was this person asked to be kidnapped? Why was this person asked to be rescued? Why was this device asked to be obtained, etc.? Because it doesn't always have, the bounty doesn't have to be a person. It could actually be, trying to sneak in and break things out or steal stuff or whatever. So I'd like to see a nice cross section of things that, as you're watching the movie, you start trying to, piece these things together. What is the big deal here? Why are all these things, how do they all fit together? And what I'd like to see in the end, because obviously it's under the auspice of having a champion or champions at the end collect their prize. And so what I'd like to see is once you're going to have bounty hunters fighting it, that it kind of, after the whole brawl, the whole brouhaha settles, and all of these things as you're watching and seeing the all the ingenuitive ways that Boba Fett and IG-88 and Boss, Asajj Ventress, Dirge, Cad Bane, all of these characters are winning and outsmarting, outmuscling, out force powering, out whatever their opponents, that they get down to kind of like a final showdown, right? Kind of like, all right, kind of almost like the good, bad, and the ugly, right? Little, you got a number of final contestants that kind of make up the final group. Now, obviously, they can pick whatever they want, but I would like to see kind of like 6, maybe 3 from the Clone Wars, 3 characters from the Clone Wars, 3 characters from the original trilogy, all meeting together as per the instructions, as per the rules, and then they're getting ready to throw down, and you're like, okay, what's going to happen now? You got Boba Fett, maybe IG-88 made it, maybe Bosk made it, maybe Asajj Ventress and her partner up with Dirge made it, and then Cad Bane, and they're all kind of like, hands on the trigger, ready to go. And then at this point is where you get the final reveal, because nobody knows who is running this, this call for the Great Hunt. And that reveal and tie-in with the other movies is none other than Darth Maul. And then he makes his appearance and lays out, he basically rewards them for what they've done. And what you kind of find out through the movie is that all of the targets and all of the things that have been happening were orchestrated by him to solidify his power in the underworld and to solidify his strength in the basically the more nefarious areas of the galaxy. So he had basically had them doing his dirty work, but he was going to reward them. But the other part of that reward is that he has one final mission for him, and that's why he wanted to get this. He wanted to weed out, kind of in that Sith way, weed out the weak. He only wanted the strong, the ones that were smart enough, quick enough, strong enough to make it to where he's at right now. And that's when he reveals that he has one final mission for him. And then it leaves you on a cliffhanger, but he punches up a little hologram. Maybe this could be in the post-credits or at the end, and then you see a picture of Obi-Wan. Boom, roll credits. There you go. Now that would tie into the next Obi-Wan flick, and then that Obi-Wan flick would be them trying to lure Obi-Wan out and track him down, so that way Darth Maul could have his final confrontation with Obi-Wan. Now, I know that kind of goes a little bit different from the way that Darth Maul found out about the whereabouts of Obi-Wan in the Clone Wars animated show, but to me, I think that would be pretty impressive and awesome. You have a team of bounty hunters tracking it down. Now, you could also do it where this reveal happens earlier before the end of the movie, and these guys do face off against Obi-Wan. You can make it like that, where they face off against Obi-Wan, maybe Obi-Wan and some other, hiding Jedi or whatever, and Obi-Wan is able to defeat or hold these guys off enough and escape, and then maybe Boba Fett throws a tracking device onto the ship that Obi-Wan gets away in or whatever, and Obi-Wan decides, man, he needs to return to Tatooine, etc., etc., etc. I don't know. There's different ways you can do that, but that's how I could see the Great Hunt basically evolving. It's basically a story showing its who's the best of the bounty hunters are. It gets down to the a final group. Those group that group finds out that they're going to be hired to take on and the ultimate mission for Darth Maul, which is tracking down, locating, and either capturing or securing Obi-Wan. So now, what if this was a movie that happened after the Sarlacc? So what I would show is I would actually show it. I mean, it kind of sucks to see him running around post Sarlacc without seeing the Sarlacc. So epic movie crawl. You've got that coming down. You maybe see the twin suns. You kind of switch down, kind of look down towards Tatooine, and then it kind of in the entrance, in the beginning of the movie, you zoom down, you see the Sarlacc pit, and you see basically Boba Fett emerging from there. I mean, if you're going to do it after that, you got to show it. You need to show it. I mean, that's something all of us fans would want to see. And you see him crawling out, maybe you see some explosions and some, guts or whatever, the Sarlacc flailing, and Obi-Wan crawling out, ripping the tendrils off of him and all that stuff. And there goes the beginning of the movie. Now, in this one, I would say it would probably be a good idea for Mangold and his team to basically take the experience they had from Logan and apply it to Boba Fett. So perhaps at this point, being faced with mortality, basically almost dying in a slow, painful death in the Sarlacc pit, he's able to escape. He wants to give himself a second chance at life and tries to take the easy road. Now, in the Legends lore, when he was young, he did marry a woman, but eventually and had a child, a daughter, and eventually, he left them, and then there was a whole storyline where they were trying to get revenge on him, and et cetera, for leaving, and it was a whole thing. What I would see though is if it's post, Sarlacc, have him basically gone off to live a somewhat normal life, something low key. And so then what's the hook going to be? What's going to drag him back into either bounty hunting or doing what he knows how to do best, disintegrations, and all that jazz. So what I would say is bring this, because obviously around this time that that happened, Return of the Jedi. So you have the Death Star 2 getting blown up. You've got the New Republic being formed. I mean, they're fighting with the Imperial remnant, the leftovers of the Empire that's in disarray, and perhaps one of the strongholds that the Empire has is on Mandalore. So perhaps they've garrisoned that up, and they've got that one on lock. The rebellion is spread too thin. They're not able to basically come to the aid of Mandalore, the Mandalorian system. And then the Mandalorians, who have kind of tried to go overall in a more peaceful way, and they've kind of shed a lot of their warrior mentality. There's little remnants here and there left over. And if you kind of look at Rebels, you've got Sabine and whatnot stuff. There's all kinds of ties you can bring in with Clone Wars on that side. All the the characters from that awesome show. You could even do that here, and you can bring in. I mean, basically the storyline would be Mandalore is being subjected, still under Imperial rule. there's chaos going and jockeying for power within the empire, the Imperial Remnant, but that is one of those places where the people are suffering, and Sabine finds herself, in a position where she was, you know, in leadership. She's kind of in a leadership position, but she goes missing. All right, so they've lost. Maybe she becomes the Mandalore, basically the head of the Mandalorians, but she goes missing. Okay, and his people are suffering. Okay, they're dying, they're suffering, they're being brutalized, because the empire has basically focused, at least whatever group that's in control of that system has really focused their efforts, and then they try to basically, bleed that system of their, precious ore and stuff. One of the things that were big coming from Mandalore was Beskar Gam. That's a kind of metal. That's what they use for their armor. It is some of them, some of the best suits of armor for the Mandalorians could also be resistant to lightsaber blows and stuff like that. There's all kinds of EU and role-playing game canon. I won't bore you with that, but anyway, so this is where you find Boba Fett, and he's with his family, maybe somewhere else, saying that they don't want to get involved. Maybe one of his family, the Fett's family, in that line, comes and seeks him out and says, hey, look, this is what's going on, whatever. And Boba Fett's like, look, I'm not doing it. I'm steering clear. I've got my family here to take care of, and I'm just not going to do it. So that guy leaves and is dejected or whatever, and he kind of goes to return to Mandalore, but he was followed by Imperial agents, okay, because they're keeping track of everybody. So the Imperial agents follow him there. They track him down. They see who he's talking to, and when Boba Fett's not around, they basically either abscond, capture the family, to kind of ensure that Boba Fett doesn't get involved in an illogical but plausible line of thinking, or they kill or severely injure. It doesn't have to necessarily be that they're dead, but maybe they're in a life-threatening situation, and he comes back to that, either seeing them dead, knowing they're gone, or seeing them dying, and he has to put them up, and hopefully they pull through. So in a fit of rage, because and seeking vengeance, he basically goes back to Mandalore for revenge, but not only revenge. In the process, he is going to go to free the Mandalorian people and return them kind of to their glory, their warrior spirit, their warrior glory, and help break them free from the oppression of the Imperial Remnant. So that's how I see that story playing out. He basically goes there. Now, the other cool things about that is, he finds out about Sabine, the Darksaber. He finds out about this, that, and the other. So you find people wanting to prop him up as the Mandalore. They call him the new Mandalore. He's the one in charge. He's doing that, but inside, the way I would write it is that he doesn't want it. He doesn't want to be the Mandalore. He doesn't want to be the one in charge. He's just taking up that mantle temporarily. And perhaps throughout this movie, he can kind of, he's basically trying to rally basically the resistance to overthrow and defeat the Imperials that are there. And so in order to do that, he needs to gather up the best Mandalorian super commandos there are, and anybody who will help. The other thing would be cool too is throughout this, maybe he meets up with Ahsoka, right? Maybe he meets up with some of the guys from the Rebels, because they're there to try and help Sabine, and they all team up. They go to break her out. They all work together, and he kind of leads them in missions to completely liberate Mandalore. And at the end, after defeating all of the Empire, that's the Imperial remnant that's there, and finally rearming his people, reorganizing them. They want to prop him up as the Mandalore. They're chanting his name and everything like that. And then boom, he defers to Sabine and passes the mantle to her, and then goes back to see he either liberates, rescues his family in the process. He basically makes peace that he had his revenge if they died, or he takes, he comes back, to their side, and as they're, getting out of their coma or whatever situation, he could say, basically, it is done. You have been avenged. Yada yada yada. Boom. Roll credits, whatever. But now the Mandalorian planet is independent. They're not Republic. They're not Empire. They're their own system that could lead to future movies and stuff like that, and future, political dynamics where maybe even the First Order hasn't taken over Mandalore yet, and there's more, reasonings you can, it can be plausible, because at one point the Mandalorians took over, pretty much almost took over the entire galaxy. So that was a story in Legends. So anyway, that's what I would think would make for a pretty interesting story, at least for the post Sarlacc. It would have to be a mission of revenge, but I want to. The reason I threw in the Imperials taking over Mandalore and all that kind of stuff, and the liberation part is because I would like to see it on a grand scale, that the things that he does are not only epic for his own family and his own revenge, but that as part of that, he does something for his entire people. And I would title this movie Boba Fett: Rise of the Mandalore. So what would you like to see in your Boba Fett movie? Because I know we've taken a look. We've seen Solo has been taking a hit really bad in the box office. A message that was very clear has been sent, that we, the consumers, the customers, the fans, are going to let Lucasfilm know what we want. So I'd love to see your comments. Let me know what it is you'd like to see in a Boba Fett movie. These are just, two ideas brainstorming that I had, over the last couple of days, of possibilities of how, a Boba Fett movie could work. One of the things I would like to see is I would like to see a lot of the characters from the animated series get pulled in, whether it's before the Sarlacc or after. Even in that one, in the discussion I had about the post Sarlacc, and I talked about Ahsoka Tano, Sabine, different things, different people like from Rebels. You could still bring in Cad Bane. You could still bring in Dirge, Asajj Ventress, Bosk, IG-88, Dengar. Maybe Boba Fett calls in like a, hey, you guys owe me one for whatever reason. I'm sure there's a reason for every one of them to want to help him out, or he could convince them in some way. And to see all of them working in their own ways to help liberate, Mandalore would be cool too. So I think if you did the pre-Sarlacc film, obviously you can tie Solo, the Boba Fett movie, and Obi-Wan movie together. That would flow together. If it's a post-Sarlacc, it'd kind of be more independent and on its own, but it would also be rewarding in itself. So let me know what you think. I'd love to see some comments down below. Go ahead and put your ideas down. Give me a like if you like this video, and share it so other people can listen to it. And I hope you have a wonderful day. If you enjoy this channel, hit subscribe. Thanks a lot.